This is a group discussion on how are we going to adapt our MYP units for the rest of the year. That's how we sort of started this, and then we've got this is a meeting of the minds focusing on PHE in different cultural contexts. We'll focus on the how, the why, the actions, thinking, a forward thinking with a growth mindset and a proactive approach. And that came from Daryl. Thank you very much for that. Today we have myself, Dominic Darley. I'm head of P at ACS Egham School in England, and we have Daryl. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Certainly. I'm the MYP coordinator in Lund, Sweden, workshop leader, field rep, been involved with the MYP PHE curriculum for 11, 12 years. So really looking forward to this discussion.
Everett.
Yeah, I'm Everett Hill. I am the head of department for physical education at Qingdao Amerasia International School in Qingdao, China. I'm also the athletic director. I'm currently teaching grades 5 through 10, so kind of give a range there. We are currently out of school. We've actually been out of school since January 7th. We had a 4-week break, and then we started online teaching. I'm also involved with Service in Action, and this is year 11 or 12 for me in the MYP as well.
Ken.
Hi, I'm Ken Ford. I'm at Western Academy of Beijing, currently on the west coast of Canada. We've been doing online learning for 9 weeks now since the end of Chinese New Year, with 1 week break in there, and it looks like we'll be doing it till the end of the year in some way, shape, or form. I've been working in MYP for 9 years now, and I'm a BQC reviewer and a workshop leader.
And Remke.
Hi, I'm Remke Langendonk. I'm the MYP coordinator at United World College Thailand and PhD teacher for the MYP. MYP workshop leader as well, and I've worked on writing the PhD curriculum a little while back, being an author and a portfolio examiner too. Happy to be here.
Cool. All right, so we're going to discuss a few different questions with focusing on a few different topics. The first question we'd like to focus on is how are lessons connected to the final assessment task, and how are schools exploring the statement of inquiry with a meaningful and authentic connection? And I'd like Daryl to start this discussion.
Yeah, certainly. In Sweden, we are still on a full schedule. So we are still in school. Lessons are running from 8:30 to 4 o'clock. But obviously what we've had to do is adapt and do some forward thinking on how we're going to plan if we did go to online teaching. And I think one of the most important elements is what we expect from our students, what we expect from our PhD teachers and our teams, because it's a lot of time. But what we also want to focus on is how we can explore the statement of inquiry and connect it even more to the final summative task. And we've tried to use it where it's not just for online teaching, it's how can we use a digital platform even when this situation is over. So we've really tried to focus on, okay, what can we do? We've tried to be a little bit more explicit with our Google Classrooms. So as an entry point to our unit, we actually post our statement of inquiry in the Google Classroom. We get our students in MYP1 just coming up with a simple inquiry question to explore the unit. We do not even go into conceptual, debatable, or factual yet. It's a transition period. They're understanding it. In MYP 3, 4, and 5, we get them to post a conceptual, debatable, or factual question. Again, this is all done as prep work before the unit starts. What you will see is students start thinking about the same inquiry at home, and this is not homework. We call it home learning. So it really gets them thinking about how to approach the unit. What is the unit actually going to help them improve? What are the teachers going to actually demonstrate in their teaching and learning? Once the students have answered these questions, it gives the teacher a platform of where the students are, what's their understanding, what they want to explore. Then the teacher can respond to the questions. Also, what we tend to do is get the students answering other students' questions. Again, taking ownership of the learning. Yes, we do this in the classroom in the PhE hall, but now we're actually getting them to do it at home. When we've started actually doing this as a trial, we see that the students are still truly understanding that conceptual lens and that state of inquiry. Also, when we give them that final summative task, we ask them, what is their question going to actually do to help them understand that final assessment task? And like I said, we haven't gone to online teaching. This is something we're implementing. And it really gets the students thinking and the teachers thinking at a different level. When it comes down to actually adapting our final summative task, we got our teams on a PD day thinking, if it was going to be an online assessment, how could we make it really more authentic, more meaningful to the students? So instead of it being using a graphs task where they could show a demonstration in school, whether they could do a presentation, what could we do using the digital tools? And I know a lot of my staff said, you know, we've got to take it easy. I totally understand that. The most important thing is to relax and use this as a learning opportunity for the teachers to learn, the students to learn, and everyone to learn as the MYP community. And in closing that, I would still say what we've seen in the last 4 or 5 weeks, make it engaging to the students, make it relevant, still make it challenging. Do not just give them busy work, because if you do, you will lose your students after about 2 weeks. So right now, our students are very engaged. We cannot tell the future. And one other question I should post was about the criterion. Obviously, with the new release, we don't need to stress about getting all criteria twice. But then that doesn't mean take away the connection of teaching towards the MYP objectives and trying to assess it through the criteria. It's not just a stop. That's a little bit of information we've received from the IB, but we are in a unique opportunity to develop the students and the teachers. So that was my quick sort of 3-4 minute overview. Anyone else in the group would like to add any more information or follow on or post an additional question?
Remke, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, well, we're only in, we've had 3 weeks of online learning now basically behind us. Before that, I was placed in 2 weeks quarantine myself. So that was a perfect opportunity to have a bit of a play around for our school to look at. We've structured things a little bit differently, especially for PHE, and actually come up with a completely new unit to run online basically. And as we had not quite, but we anticipated when we were going online mode, we've ensured that we've given certain grade levels actually a skipping rope home. So we've been able to give every student a piece of equipment to take with them that we could actually build our units around. Are we still fully in an inquiry mode is a little bit questionable, because there's been about getting things up and running and getting students understanding what the expectations are and how things go. It's not as great as we would like it to be, but after now this 2-week break and the most likelihood that we will continue online learning for a bit longer, that will become a stronger focus. But we have been able to continue a unit in a bit of a mini version than what you would normally expect in a class. With actually creating a movement composition routine. So in this case, a jump rope routine where you take the team element out, but you create then and put in the individual element. So in that sense, we had to stop the units we were on, and we came up with a new unit to start off with that we've just finished and gone through a normal assessment as a B, C, and a D criteria. Not full strands, but most of it. So that's where we are.
Ken, would you like to talk about what you're doing?
Yeah, we were in the position where our entire community was on Chinese New Year break when the word came down that we were going to be going on to online learning. So we have families and staff who had a real challenge because we didn't have our technology with us. We didn't have, like, my wife and I don't have our school laptops. We're working off an iPad and a personal laptop. We have kids who were all over the world and some with only a phone. So one of the first things we had to do is get a really clear understanding of what the kids were capable of doing with what they had at their disposal. And that took some time to wrap our heads around. Now that we're there, we're in a much better position to track and help support kids in really specific and targeted ways. We have a pretty fantastic tech team who are doing that on a daily basis. There's been a mix of new units and adaptations to existing units going on, and what we're working on now is really stripping back all the not unnecessary pieces, but stripping back all the pieces that aren't essential learning. And one of the things we've learned over the last 9 weeks is kids need way more time than you anticipate to do anything. So tasks that would take a lesson or 2 lessons, I'm now giving almost a week worth of learning towards, to make sure that the kids have the time to do it in a deep way. Because I think we really underestimate just how much impact we have in the classroom and how much we can guide the students and support them and make sure that they're on track. We've noticed a real up and down in student engagement as well. That was mentioned earlier. If it's not good work, they're not going to do it, and they're not going to come back. So that's been a real challenge for us as well. Yeah, that's it.
I suppose you guys didn't really have the opportunity to be there and set it up with them, I suppose. Maybe that was...
No, but even though that the challenge we had was also sort of tempered by, this wasn't a surprise to us in terms of infrastructure. We already had a really rough plan in place due to the pollution concerns in Beijing. So for the last 3 or 4 years, we've already had school closure plans in place for online learning to be able to switch from a Tuesday to a Wednesday to a fully online model. What that took for granted was being synchronous versus asynchronous. And what we've had to do is, we started with trying to be as synchronous as possible with our existing timetable, but quickly learned just the percentage of kids who were outside of Beijing that it just wouldn't work for. And teachers, we have a pretty significant proportion of faculty out of country.
Yeah, wow. All right, Everett, I'll jump in here because I know you guys at your school are actually slowly going to be starting to come out. So,
well, we're sure hoping.
We're actually live now, guys, by the way. I can see us on Facebook, so I managed to fiddle around with it. So our school, we started planning a little bit beforehand. We had probably a couple of weeks, and especially in our department, we started thinking about some of the units that we were currently doing and seeing if we can actually adapt them rather than change the whole unit. What we managed to do was finish some of the units which sort of related to criterion B and D, where the students could sort of get on with those particular assessment tasks away from school in some grade levels. And in some other grade levels, some units were just starting. So for example, in grade 6 and 8, we decided to start a brand new unit, 6 and 7. And in grade 6, we decided to create a health-related fitness unit where they're creating a fitness program, because we don't actually do that type of program in grade 6 anyway. So this is a new thing for them. And in grade 7, they were about to start an invasion games unit. And so what we've done is we've asked them to sort of stick with invasion games and focus on the skill, because they were going to be looking at particular skill and analysing it anyway as part of criterion A. And we've decided for them to sort of thinking about what's happening in the world now. People are using YouTube and so forth, for them to create a YouTube video on how to coach a skill. They're not going to be assessed through criterion C. It's just going to be a plan of a video, so how to basically get to this particular skill. But what we decided, because at the time we didn't really know what was going on, so we had the 3 weeks we knew we were going to be away, and we decided each week would set up a task. Been listening to quite a few people online and sort of spread your tasks out and so forth. I had a big sort of messaging conversation with Everett a couple of weeks ago, and it, you know, it really helped to sort of listen to, don't give them too much, give them a little bit of a task, make sure it's not too, you know, you don't just have your summative assessment. We had to reshape the statement of inquiry, but we did stick with criterion A and B, and so far it seems to be working. The kids are posting videos of themselves doing or practicing the skills, and now they're going to sort of start to develop that video. And what I did was I created my own beginnings of a video where I showed them how I was developing a keepy uppy and using a football, and then I showed them my goal was to try and do 5 keepy uppies, and so that's what I sort of stated at the beginning of the video. I showed them how I was going to try and do it, and then I did it. And this was sort of just the beginnings of the tasks. But overall, we're trying to sort of keep with MYP units. I think it's really important that the kids have an assessment task that they're still driving towards them. We're not just giving them busy work, and that was one of my worries when this all started, that people might be giving them busy work, or people are starting to think, what am I going to do next week? What am I going to do the week after, and so forth. And so that's where we are at the moment. Grade 10s have a martial arts unit, which I've started beforehand, but I've managed to continue and just adapt, and I'm teaching them online lessons with Zoom. They've also got a load of resources which they're doing, and they will also create a video sequence, criterion B and C, and so that whole unit stayed the same basically, which has been pretty good. All right, Everett.
Yeah, we were in a similar situation to Ken, except we actually started our break on January 10th. Instead of taking a winter break, we took a 4-week break tacked on to the Chinese New Year. So the last time I actually saw my students was January 7th. And for us, that was before everything hit. So our students, much like Ken said, we're out of the country. We have students in Korea, we have students in the United States, Europe, all over the shop, and the same thing with teachers. So we're still in that situation where we have staff and students around the world, not able to get back into Qingdao right now, at least not for a period of time. And like Remke said, if you come back, you're locked down. So with that in mind, I was fortunate that I had finished my unit before we left, and we were going into a health related fitness unit, which was a criterion A, B, and D. Normally, I would have done fitness training in the school and focused on that within the classroom, but it was an easy shift to go from a health related fitness planning unit to a wellness planning, specifically focusing on time management. Just their normal day. As others have said, it takes a lot longer to do the work for these students. Many of our students did not have their technology or any number of living conditions as well. Some of them haven't actually been out of their apartments since sometime early in January, and it's almost it's April now. So those we have all these different situations we're dealing with. So I chose to focus on to shift from a health-related fitness and fitness planning to a wellness planning, with them planning out their weeks, using that as the basis of it, and then reflecting on their weeks. How was it going? What were the stresses? What were the positive pieces? And it was successful. It's something that I'm going to look at continuing in the future and shifting that unit a bit. Just because the wellness aspect has been significant, far more than I think any of us realize with the length of this, because one of the things that we were under the impression when we started was that this might be just a short term, 1 or 2 weeks out, how bad can it get? Famous last words, of course. So we kind of started with that in mind as a school, and then as it's delayed or extended out, we've obviously had to make some significant shifts. So we are hoping to return soon, but we've also just learned that we're going to be, our reentry date is going to be pushed farther out. We don't have an actual date yet. So I'll be looking at that. What does the rest of the year look like? And those are going to be significant things. I'm at a point where my units are finished. I finished up with the assessment of planning, reflection, doing some online work with Criterion A, using some of the YouTube videos and online assessments. We use Microsoft Teams, not Google. So we're able to utilize that for our assessments. Is it an ideal MYP unit? No, I don't think any of us would say we're probably running those, but that's where we're at. So, but it does put me in a place where I can minimize the criterion for the rest of the year as we move forward.
Okay. Anyone like to add anything to that before we move on to our next question?
Yeah, I think, Dominic, just to follow on what everyone said, I think it's really important that if a school or a PhD department can develop some student focus groups where every maybe 3 to 4 weeks, you check in and have a similar to us now, a small discussion with the students about the teaching and learning, how are they finding it? Again, like we would do in the classroom, reflect on the unit, what worked well, what did they find challenging, how much of this, what they're actually learning on this online platform, is helping them to develop their understanding. Because again, I think, as you said as well, you, Everett, and a few others, if you look at the discussions on the different social media forums, there is some that are doing busy work. And if you've been doing this since January, like maybe some of the schools have, what are you doing to come now? And that's where you will lose the engagement. It's that growth mindset of thinking, what can we do to tweak our units, our lessons, the way we facilitate a lesson to improve the students' learning? Because again, the students are at the center of that program model, and we need to guide them on this process. Is it going to be perfect? Of course not. But this is such a great learning experience for every MYP PhD educator out there to develop their teaching and still see how we can move the students' learning forward. And by developing focus groups of maybe MYP 1, 5 students, MYP 3, MYP 5, and maybe every 3 to 4 weeks just having a check-in. And we've actually said that at our school, if we do go online, that's a requirement from each of our subject leaders, is to meet with the students of different groups, just to check their understanding. And it's not what's not working well, just that. It's listening, hearing their feedback. Okay, what can we do to adapt?
Yeah, to echo that, is like we are now a few weeks in, and we've learned from a lot of other schools around the world. And we've decided, as soon as we went online, to actually pull in extra teachers to become homeroom teachers. So we haven't kept the daily routine as such. We've changed it a little bit, but we still have an 8 o'clock start, where every teacher only has about 8 students each, and we do exactly that check-in. Yep. It's that mental and emotional check. How are things going? But also more subject specific when we're doubtful, when things are becoming busy work, and how much and how relevant it still is. And that's been hugely valuable, because we've been able to bite little things in the butt where we've seen that kids are struggling at home, not necessarily because of their own accord, but because they lack the structure from the parents at home. And we've just been able to pull in extra teachers who are not mentors and not homeroom teachers, and then basically splitting up all the classes to allow for these small scale communications to take place every single day at the start of the day. So we know where our students are, we know if they're in a happy place. And we've had super positive feedback on that one from both parents and students alike, to say like we're really getting valuable information there on how things are and how our students are feeling. So definitely can echo that you've got to look at some form that works for your school where you're going to get information.
Yeah.
If I can interject with our last several online meetings with our staff, we have a small school, so we have small groups already meeting regularly, doing exactly what Remke just said. And like, I think it was Ken that said, we've also looked at stripping our units down to what's essential, or maybe it was Daryl, I apologize which one said that. But our discussions now, as we start to look at returning to school, is what is necessary for our curriculum for the rest of the year. Can we strip it back to just really essential, so we're meeting our requirements and meeting that, but more importantly, what is going to be in the best interest of our kids coming out of 8, 10, 12 weeks in quarantine, coming back into school and restarting. So yeah, that for us has largely been our conversations. It's less about the content and more about bringing the students back online as students in a classroom at varying levels of completion of work and varying levels of experience, just within the country and out of the country.
Okay. Should we move on to the second question? A lot of people are starting to watch now, and some people are starting to comment a little bit. No questions yet, no extra questions anyway. So question number 2, I'd like Ken to start with this one, if possible. Are you monitoring progress? How are you monitoring progress through formative tasks and assessments? And I mean, also how are you ensuring quality feedback to move students' learning forward? And you've obviously been away from your students, and so it's been interesting. I mean, for myself, on checking up and how do you do that, and especially it might be quite hard for you as well. So how do you manage to do that because you're in a different time zone?
We so what we've started to look at is adapting existing summatives to be more suitable for the environment and making sure we're not just trying to force in what we were going to do anyway into this new environment, because they're not going to work, particularly criterion Cs. But we also, from a PHE perspective, you have to be really conscious that kids can't go outside in most locations now. They don't have access to fields. They don't have access to gyms. If you're in Asia, most of your families are in small apartments, and their ability to actually do physical movement is pretty limited. So you have to be very conscious about that. And what you mentioned about doing an invasions game unit and shifting the focus is very similar to the conversations we've been having. That key piece around good feedback comes from the way you're using your platforms. And the types of platforms you're using to give feedback. So what you'd see from at WAB is a wide range of platforms being used. Teams gets used quite a bit. There's the expectation that you are having online sessions with your kids at least once a week. And the form that takes can take, you can be teaching lessons, you can be offering office hours, you can be offering clarification and feedback, but making sure that you provide multiple opportunities for that face-to-face with the kids. There's been a big refocus on formative and feedback through formative, and using platforms like Flipgrid to help support that and make sure kids get the opportunity to share through a range of different tools, and not just submitting documents to do your criterion A work, which I think is a really easy default for us to get into, is just turn this into a simple criterion A nutrition task and get away from some of the bigger get away from some of the bigger ideas of the subject. And what Everett mentioned around shifting this to a wellness focus is really important, because the kids are in a really challenging position. And I think we often overlook that, just how hard this is on them. And we need to make sure that the work we are expecting them to do reflects our understanding and our caring for them.
Yeah, for sure. Everett, do you want to go next? You've gone quiet.
First time I made that mistake. I'll echo what Ken said. We need to be conscious of what the students are able to do and what we're having them turn in. And then, as far as giving the formative feedback, one of the things we found is we've really needed to limit our platforms. We also have a number of platforms being used at our school. And in some cases, that's actually hindered us, because just when you have multiple platforms and you're trying to remember passwords and where is that document and where is that feedback and where does this go? For me personally, I have tried to maintain, using ManageBack, of course, as our monitoring system and our grading system and marking system. We use Google Teams, or sorry, Microsoft Teams, not Google. I wish we could. We are using Microsoft Teams as our platform. I'm giving my formative feedback in there. And for that, we're using either written feedback or sometimes verbal or screencasting, with the particular documents. Then we can go through and use voice as well. But yeah, recognizing that our students are in all kinds of different situations right now, and their headspace is all over the shop. So some of my students, quite frankly, aren't even doing work, and they're just kind of struggling to get by. And it's a reality. We've completely shifted their educational, point and point of reference, and we're not there to be with them daily. So for some of the kids, this is amazing. They're doing really well and excelling, and the feedback is easy. Others, they've kind of dropped off the radar, and as a school, we're trying to deal with that. It's not easy. We could, if we were in a classroom, we could pull them aside and talk. But here online, we're trying to do this. We're trying to do the video conferences. We're trying to do feedback in multiple different ways. And it's got a mixed review. Some of it's doing really well, and some of it's challenging.
Yeah, of course. Daryl, sorry.
Yeah, again, as you're all aware, we're not in that situation. But we like to use it as more of the formative process. So we really get the students understanding how important these tasks are, the pathways to the final summative task. Because some students, you hear them say, is it formative or summative? And if it's formative, we don't need to do it. But it's reinforcing that this is the stepping stone to that final summative task. Also, what we've tried to do, again, as forward planning, is we've done a lot of peer assessment on students' work, but also something we've tried doing with not only in the PhD department, but other departments, is a teacher will highlight 3 or 4 sections of work for criterion A and say, I want you to think about why we've highlighted that work. And if you had to give feedback yourself on why it's been highlighted, what would you say? Because normally they do the work, they submit it, and that's it. Instead of saying, we really want you to look through your work again and again before you give it back to us. And it's amazing seeing students say, I know why you highlighted this, because I haven't clearly done this. It's not linked towards this. So it's more giving ownership to the students. And also just to focus on when you give feedback to the students, what are they actually going to read? If it's that formative grade where you give a number, we have stopped giving formative numbers at our school. We give it clear feedback on what the student needs to know to help improve their learning. It shouldn't be an essay. It should be 2 or 3 bullet points. Again, survey the students. Some refer clearly to the criteria. Some refer to the task-specific clarifications. Some teachers use their own language. But what is the message and how is it helping the students? And another element, what we've done for MYP 4, they've just started badminton unit, our racket sports. We're videotaping almost every lesson. We're not using this yet as a discussion forum. We're saving it for that. If we do go online, we can use video evidence of their own work to lead to discussions. So even if they need to have a criterion A and they have some type of test, we're using students' work instead of saying, look at this video from the Olympics. We're looking at the students getting the work. So they truly, again, try and understand it. And then when the students actually get that feedback, when we actually talk about how it helped them, at the end of the lesson, we're asking them to do a simple post-it note. What feedback did the teacher give you today to help move your learning forward? Some students will say nothing and walk out, even though you've spoken to them 2 or 3 times. So again, I would recommend to all of the educators out there, when we're giving feedback on a digital platform, what is that feedback telling the students and how is it helping them? And I think that's a big key focus point. Don't overcomplicate it. It's a new experience for many of us, this online teaching, or it will be. Just try and take it easy. Don't do too much, but still remember you can implement the MYP framework by using the growth mindset and that proactive approach.
Cool. Remke?
Yeah, I think we're a bit on the line with what Everett just said. It's like, it's so important that in our subject, our kids are staying active now, because all the other subjects are sitting still. It's not get up and do any projects or group work. So we as a department have decided it's crucial to move away from looking at that criterion A, but it's crucial to look at how can we make sure that whilst we keep the MYP criterion in our heads, that we actually are getting them active. So that's why we've selected activities that they can do even in a small space, cramped in between a bed and a cupboard, basically, looking at a jump rope, looking at a yoga routine. But to make sure that the kids are getting feedback on what they're doing is that, although often we ask them to switch off the cameras, we're using Google Hangout in this case, is that in these cases we say like switch on your cameras, and with the grid view, when we are doing like a 20-minute warm-up as a class, all the kids are physically active and physically participating, so we can straight away see if they are also physically engaged. They are teaching each other actually online. We just asked one of the kids to take a lead and just start and do something, which gives the teacher the opportunity to provide some feedback for others who actually are struggling. And like Ken was saying, we're using Flipgrid to upload when we're not meeting them face to face, but when we're uploading it, when we're not meeting them face to face, but we're expecting them to do, in this case, a jump rope or a yoga routine, that they upload it to Flipgrid, and they either get teacher feedback or we use it next class and break them up in small groups for peer feedback and a little group free feedback. So there is still that ongoing formative feedback like we would do in a classroom. We've never gone to a grading system with the formative, like Daryl said, that's not the key. It's how can you move forward regardless of where you are and just looking at the next steps, basically. And it's been going well. We have ManageBack as well as Everett has, but we can use Google Doc integration with ManageBack, which basically, if the kids are planning, allows us to leave comments every day a little bit and where they are and how they're progressing. So the formative feedback hasn't been too different for us in this online learning process as it would be in a class, apart from the really physical feedback, the really face-to-face, of course, when you see them, but we still try to implement it as much as we possibly can. And it's been going okay. Yeah, we see our students 50% of the time, so 50% of the time we have to see our students face-to-face. Doesn't have to be for that full lesson, can be shorter, which we often do. We often do like a 15-20 minutes get physical active, and then they break off on their own, basically looking at creating the movement routine and then uploading the evidence to Flipgrid or to ManageBack. That's a bit of structure we're handling at the moment. And so far, so good. Yeah.
Sounds good. We're doing a similar thing, but we're asking the kids to upload short videos to their Google Drives. So they have Google Drive, we go on there, and then we're either giving them feedback face-to-face via Zoom, or we're using a Google Doc where we're putting the dates down and then giving them feedback. And that way they can also individually ask questions on the Google Doc, which when we go back into, we can see the questions if they want to ask live and things like that.
Yeah.
And again, like Daryl said, all of our formative tasks are linked to the summative, and they're not given a score. We give written feedback. We've always done that anyway. But sometimes what I've been trying to do, and the other teachers as well, is when we've had a Zoom lesson, like you said, MK, that some students will do a bit of teaching, and we'll copy their routine or their skill or whatever it is, and so that they get an opportunity to interact, because I think it's quite important for us to sort of try sometimes to keep a similar type of lesson if we can, because that's the type of thing you would probably do in class anyway. And if you can do this via Zoom or whatever you're using, the kids, the positive feedback we've got from the kids has been quite good, really, with in that respect. Getting interaction and so forth, because I feel they sort of miss each other and they still want to do that type of thing. They still want to show what they can do and things like that. Has anyone else got anything else to add to that?
Yeah, Dom, I'm just going to mention, we talked a lot about how formative feedback is really important for the kids' progression, but it's equally important for us as teachers, because it really gives us that information about, is the task clear? Do the kids understand what they're meant to be doing? And if you're getting a large group of kids who aren't doing the task the way you thought it would be done, then that's the best feedback you're going to get, that you need to change something before you expect them to change something. Our MYP coordinator has been very proactive about putting together strategies and ideas for us as an entire faculty. And one of the ones that came through is clear as kind, and just step-by-step instructions that guide students through exactly, find this, read this, think about this, do this, submit this, so that there's no confusion around what the kids are meant to be doing. I know I've been able to refine my own instruction writing through this process hugely. And going back 9 weeks ago, the blocks of text teachers were leaving because they assumed grade sixes would be able to get through it has changed significantly. So always keep in mind that that formative piece isn't just for the kids, it's for us as well.
Yeah. Can I echo that, Karen? Jump in on what Ken said. I said we've done the same. We've literally are now saying step 1, open this document. Step 2, really to make it just like as kids proof as you can. What we've also done as a recommendation to our teachers is to say, like, when you're on a Google Hangout for us, is that we basically ask the kids, like, when you're good and when you understand it, give us a wave or give us a thumbs up, and that means that you can sign off that you're good. But if you're not, just stay in the call. So you have those kids who are a bit shy to ask in front of the camera, actually hanging in as the final student into your lesson and then asking the questions that they otherwise wouldn't ask. And it's been really helpful for those students who are actually struggling to understand what you now really would like to see happening. So there's another piece of advice I would just say, like,
I did that.
consider.
Yeah, and I would also say as well, just jumping on from what Ken said as well, I know we're busy with all of this new digital online platform, but as educators, spend time documenting, whether it's in a written context, an oral context, a video, on your units of work or what you've been doing. Because we're so busy implementing new elements, trying this, trying that, maybe in 6 weeks we won't remember everything. So just like in the MYP planning process, for all of those listening, we talk about reflecting upon the unit at the end. Still continue that process. You've got the guiding questions from principles to practice. Not saying it, again, it has to be essays. So if this does happen again, or even next year, when we come to it and we're back in the classroom teaching, reflecting upon the reflections will help you understand the needs of your students and how well these lessons went. So that's a big key element to spend time reflecting as educators as well.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, I mean, we use ManageBack, and that's something which I'm always harping on about in my department. I think when you're writing these reflections, it's important to, either sort of say how you've been doing this distance learning, or how that unit can be adapted to if you're actually in the school. Because you might want to use these alternative units when you go back to normal teaching one day, and they may be useful for others. And so other teachers who teach these units next year or whatever can see how you sort of done. All right, so we're going to move on to question 3 now. I'm aware of the time, it's 2:45. Are we okay to continue? Well, 2:45 here anyway. The Zoom session may finish it after an hour, which may be in about 5 or 7 minutes time. Would you be okay if it got to that point, we had a break and then a mini break, like 2 minutes, and then I set up another Zoom and I get us back live again? Is that okay with everyone?
Yeah, how long would that be for? I'll tell you why. This is not an excuse, but it's my son's 17th birthday today. So we're actually meant to be going out to fly his new drone, because we're going to go out and do that. But I can do a little bit for another 30 minutes or so.
I don't think it'll probably be an extra 20, 30 minutes maybe.
Yeah, that's fine, buddy. That's fine. No worries.
All right, so we'll carry on until this starts running out, and then we'll say we're having a break, because hopefully this will sort of tell me. So the third question we've got here is, how are you allowing inquiry to continue and develop? And I think we've sort of touched on this, and I'm going to ask Remco to start.
Yeah, And this is what I and our teachers have found the hardest part to continue with, especially when you're just stepping into that online learning. It's everybody's got to just come to grips and come to terms with it. It's like who is where, who's got what equipment available. For us, kids are actually moving back home, so then they're in different time zones. So the first week has really been like just trying to make yourself familiar with what's going on, and that pushes the inquiry a little bit to the back. So at the end, towards the end, we've been able to pick it back up again. And now after our holiday, when we go back, that will be again another focus. But inquiry, when you are online, is a lot harder, I find, than when we're actually in the classroom setting, because so often you get them just to break up in a little group or start a bit of a discussion. And we still try to use our visible thinking routines here. We still try to get students to think pair share or just come up with a quick way of how they see things. But it's not always easy, and the internet connection drops out. Not everybody's tuned in. Kids forgetting that their mic is off and then back on. And we do it through small discussions at the start. But because you can't say everybody now a quick turn and talk, it just takes longer to go through a little group. We also post it, like what Daryl said, we do post things online and just post that one question, the statement of inquiry out there. We post the factual question out there and ask for individual responses and then share them. For example, we use Padlet in that case well, just to post a statement of inquiry out there and everybody can just leave a little note with their thoughts on it. It's something that we need to gain focus back on, I would say. Which is challenging because the first step is just getting to terms with the new learning environment. And then for us, at least, the inquiry will come second.
Okay. Ken, you want to go next?
It's being really conscious about how you give students an opportunity to engage in that inquiry and not assuming that it's going to just happen during the course of the unit, because you don't have the same opportunities for those informal questions to come up that allow you as a class to go down certain discussion pathways that lead to sometimes that deeper and more authentic inquiry. It can be really challenging in this environment because you're stuck in some pretty rigid feedback cycles, and it's not as open and flowing as a classroom environment. One of the pieces that I found worked well for my groups was get a real explicit introduction to the statement of inquiry through a flip grid and just getting them to respond to it, and getting them to respond to it at multiple times during the unit. So keep coming back to that statement of inquiry and getting their response to it after a series of activities or engagements to see how their learning's changing and see how their understanding's changing.
Yeah.
Oops, sorry, trying to check some questions here. Daryl, do you want to go next?
Yeah, again, for us, it's a lot of thinking about the future of what could happen, because as I've said 3 or 4 times now, we're still in session in school, but also we've tried to post more learning engagements online and letting the students take ownership of inquiring actually into what we're telling them. Even if, for instance, we're meant to be starting for our MYP2s, our athletics unit coming up, even for some of them, when we look at the long jump or the triple jump, you know, we talk to them about, okay, think about the run-up, the approach. That's all we're telling you. Have a discussion. Here's in groups of 4. What do we need to experiment? What do we need to trial? What do we need to look at? What do we need to think about? Just giving the students ownership of their own learning. I think it's going to be interesting, and every, I would say, teacher, every school will find this in that online platform harder, I think, than being in the classroom. But it's just, how do we tweak it? How do we let the students drive that inquiry? Yes, we can always say, go back to the state of inquiry. But when they're in that lesson and there's a question that they have that they want to ask, they know they can approach you. Is it in our schedule that we have currently that we're going to use if we go there, where there's separate setting times where students can book 2 3-minute appointments with the teacher? Also, we're going to have an inquiry question, sort of Google Sheets, that if someone posts some examples, other students can answer it in the class. So we're just looking at new ways of getting the students to have more inquiry in the class. And I think, again, listening to this community speak here, looking at other social media forums, no one has the answer. It's just what can we trial, what can we try and implement, listen to the voices of the students, and still try and promote that inquiry. And like I said earlier, make it relevant to their learning, make it significant. What can we do to keep them active?
Everett? It's gone quiet again.
Sorry, no, I muted it, and it's a little bit unstable. No, I echo what has already been said, that we're doing the best we can, but honestly, this is very difficult. The inquiry especially is hard when we're not able to engage in conversations and really delve into the issues. And the reality is, this is someone coined it as emergency online teaching as opposed to homeroom or homeschool or online teaching. This is the area that, as teachers, our teachers are finding the most difficult, really doing inquiry well. I mean, we're trying to have those conversations. We are trying to engage in them, but when you're dealing with the issues we've talked about, internet that's unstable, or an online forum where you can't have really good, rich discussions, it's a challenge. And I think it's probably the hardest piece for us as educators teaching this way, especially if we're teaching asynchronously. I think in some ways we're doing more of a stopgap, hoping we're going to get back here pretty quick. But right now we're trying to engage, we're trying to raise those questions, we're trying to encourage the students to delve deeper. But in reality, I don't know that is most successful in this forum. And I think it's probably going to be the greatest weakness moving ahead, but also something we can take back when we're face to face and really, really understand and delve into more. So for us, it has been a significant challenge.
Yeah, for our school here, maybe right now we're sort of still in the trialing things and beginning our units and so forth. But I think one of the things we've started to think about is we use Zoom, and Zoom has like group hangout sections where kids can go out and to different groups. And so I think that's something we're going to start trialing after our spring break, if we get to that point. So for example, in our the grade 7 coaching units, if kids with similar skills that they might be practicing, we're going to sort of ask them to get together and show each other their skills, and we'll pose some inquiry questions as well, so that they can actually start thinking a little bit more and share ideas. And we haven't got to that stage yet, but that's, I think, where we're going to hopefully go, and then hopefully we'll get some feedback from the students to see whether that works and so forth. But we may have to do that with other teachers as well, linking into those particular groups rather than just sort of one teacher hovering over. So that'll be something to sort of think about in the future.
Yeah, sorry, Dom, I'm gonna, those Zoom breakout rooms can be really effective for those small group conversations. I've used them for online debate, and had the debate sides break out into breakout rooms. And we've used them. We did a whole middle school assembly with over 100 kids, and had them break out into breakout rooms for a Kahoot quiz that worked pretty well. So that's a really useful tool for getting the small group discussions that Remke was mentioning earlier are really important.
Anyone else like to chime in there?
Yeah, I would say what we've done again as forward thinking is we've had one subject group basically go ahead and teach the students how to use Zoom groups. So the whole school gets the same message on how we actually work these small group sessions. Because as you know yourselves, when we have 25 different teachers all trying to teach one way of working, we wanted a continuous way across the whole school. Then teachers actually went into a PD session for an MYP development meeting, and then they taught all of the staff how to use the same Zoom chats. So the whole MYP community knew exactly how to use it, how to guide the students through it, and how to use it as an examples in the teaching and learning. And it took, a few days. But now when you say, right, we're going to use Zoom Hangouts or Zoom chats, every student in the school knows exactly how to use the function. So I think that would be a good recommendation if you do plan to use it. Implement it in one subject group so they teach them very similar to the ATL skills. We can't just say, yes, it's all ATL. We have to implement it, teach it to the students. This is how we do it. This is why we do it. It's an explicit teaching opportunity.
Absolutely. And I think that was one of the things we didn't do so well. I think we were having too many discussions about what platform to use. And then finally, when we decided on Zoom, we had about a day to actually implement it. And so it was sort of done on an ad hoc basis. But the kids seem to have sort of picked it up quite quickly, and everyone's using the same thing now. They're not using other communication methods. So it's sort of helped. But I think the next stage is those group sort of Zooms.
Yeah. And I'd recommend, again, just to have a policy where we say in a school, you can only maybe use to start with these digital platforms, Zoom, Google Chats, keep it that way just to get everyone on board. If you're in week maybe 9 or 10, then you can experiment a little bit more. But that's what I'm telling our staff. Familiarise yourself with these 2 or 3 programs, and that's it for right now.
And I'd echo that. As we entered it, we were 4 weeks of vacation, and then we entered. We just made some assumptions about what we were using, and we found out teachers were using multiple platforms, which really confused the students. So if you have time, if you have not gone into an online teaching situation, definitely have a conversation about what platforms you're going to use, keep it simple, and manage that. I know this popping up in the questions. There was one about Zoom privacy concerns. Right now, as overseas teachers, we're not concerned about that. We are aware of it, and we're doing the best we can to manage that. But there are other programs that are used as well, Google Hangouts, Classroom Teams, or Teams on Microsoft, and others which can be used. But each school really has to address that on their own.
There have been some privacy updates by Zoom in the last day or two, which I noticed as well, and it came out on a news report, and so it's useful to check that.
Yeah. We've taken something, I believe it's from a recommendation from CIS, is that on every face-to-face meeting you have with a student, whether it's a class you teach or a one-on-one meeting, you have to invite a senior management leader into your lesson. And it basically allows somebody from management, MYP coordinator is in there, and then DP coordinator, etc., counselors. It allows your management team just to jump in and just to check if you're okay and students are okay, just in case, just from a child, but also teacher safety point of view, that there's always that second adult that can come in at any point in time to protect you and protect students at the same time. It's taken us like a day or 2, 3 to make sure all teachers were up to speed with it. But after that, it's just become an automatism. So everybody is always asking somebody extra to join in. We don't always come into extra classes, but it has been very useful. Kids actually really enjoy it to see either the MYP coordinator or etc. just coming in, and really like to stay connected with you in that way as well. But I find it's not only a check to see the value of the lessons, what's taking place, it also gives you great value to see the awesome work that teachers are simply doing and what's taking place, and really gives you a lot of respect for what everybody's trying to pull off. So it hits a lot of areas at the same time. So it's a recommendation I can highly push forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we can move on to the question 4. It seems to be continuing to record, so that's okay. I have to start a new one. And the live feed is still going on. So that leads us really to question 4. How do you manage screen time, lesson times, structures, expectations, which my wife is currently taking a picture of me outside there and distracting me. So what we started off with is was our current timetable in the middle school. the elementary school decided to change their structure right from the start. And so they decided to have Fridays off as a working day for teachers, a collaborative day, catch up and so forth. But we decided to stick with our schedule. And we also then decided to only have one Zoom session a week with our classes. And then we would set tasks for the students during the week. And that tended to work, but I think what was a lot of teachers were doing were they were doing extra Zooms and making their Zooms a little bit longer and then setting more tasks and so forth. And so it was overwhelming, not only the students, but the staff themselves. And so it sort of came to a head, I think, at the end of last week, where we decided to change our structure, similar to the elementary school, where we have one day off of collaboration and no school basically. And we've decided to have Wednesday, so we have Monday and Tuesday school time, and then Wednesday off, and Thursday and Friday with school time. And we're still sort of sticking to the one Zoom time. Our lessons are now going to be 75 minutes, with a 60-minute expectation of class time. But the 60 minutes doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be teaching or Zooming for the 60 minutes. You might Zoom for 30 minutes and then 30 minutes of the kids continuing a task or starting a task and so forth. And then later on in the week, where they'll have their second lesson, they will then continue with that. And what we do, we use ManageBack and other platforms. We use ManageBack to for our attendance, and so we put the tasks on their calendar, and then we send a message out, and then when the kids see the message, they have to give a thumbs up to the message, and that's our way of collecting attendance, and also so that we know they've actually seen the task or the lesson that they need to do. And that way, we're hoping that screen time will sort of come down a little bit more, and it will hopefully give a little bit more time for the kids at home, because I think they've been, what we found over the last 3 weeks, they've been really struggling with that. And also parents at home have been struggling with managing them and the expectations and so forth and so on. So it gives a little bit more breathing time anyway. Ken, would you like to go next on that?
Yeah.
One? So it's
after 9 weeks, it's just everyone's exhausted. It takes way more out of you than you expect. Online teaching or emergency teaching, or however you want to describe it, is full on all the time. You find as a teacher, you're tied to your computer way more than you ever were in a classroom. You're checking emails constantly, you're replying, and you're receiving way more emails than you ever got. And from a kid's point of view, it's a much more adult way of communicating than they're used to, particularly at this age group, from sort of that 6 to 10 range, or MYP 1 to 5. This is where, if we were in school, kids are learning those skills on a day-to-day basis over a slow drip of the 5 years. And right now, they've been learning how to check emails on a daily basis, respond to emails that are priority, come back to emails that aren't priority, make sure you're checking in on all your platforms in an appropriate way, and they're learning it in a week. And it's not surprising kids check out when they're used to having the support from a teacher close at hand, and they don't anymore. And like Dom said, parents are overwhelmed, parents are overtaxed. A lot of them are having to work full-time jobs and manage kids learning at the same time, and a lot of it's not sustainable. I like Dom's school suggestion around, or the solution around, breaking up the week. In terms of managing screen time, there's been a big push middle school wide to try to incorporate activities away from the screen as much as possible. But then you start getting into that challenge of, well, we can't ask kids to go to the store to buy construction paper to do something, because is that really essential? And yeah, it's a unique experience. The lesson time, from a teacher's perspective, we're expected to be providing at least 2 hours of availability during the Beijing school day, every day of the week, regardless of your time zone. And then which gets really challenging for our teachers who are in Europe right now. But the rest of the time can be divvied out by offering Zoom sessions in European time zones or North American time zones, because we have kids across all of those. The expectations haven't really changed. We're still finishing the year assessing all strands of all criteria at least twice. Most subjects will have done that more than twice.
Cool. Remke, you want to go next?
Yeah. I must say, so far, and of course we're only a couple of weeks in, we're quite happy with our setup. We've before we broke up, we've created timetables for the students, looking at the normal timetable they had, but then instead of 7 periods a day, they have 4 periods a day where they meet a teacher. So it's decided by the MYP coordinator who they see when on a day, to make sure that their screen time is at least spread out, and not all teachers want to see students at exactly the same day. It also gives the student a little bit more independence to decide, okay, when do I do what kind of work? Now, us seeing kids 50% face-to-face doesn't mean that the other 50% we're letting them loose. We just got to set, as everybody else said, give them a realistic and a feasible task to do on those days that we do not meet them face-to-face. We often link that to a video submission to make sure that we can see the learning that is actually taking place. And it gives a decent balance. We also have said, like, there is no homework or as minimal homework to be given, because they are already on the screen for so many hours on a day that we try to limit that as well, just to make sure that there are indeed the breaks that both students and teachers need. But as Ken said, it's exhausting. It takes you a lot longer to prep for the online classes. And so if it's exhausting for us, it's exhausting for the kids, and you've really got to lower your expectations. But make sure that what you're teaching is not a time filler, and it's worthwhile learning. And as long as you're able to strike that balance, the kids will stay engaged and the kids will stay active, because they enjoy the interaction with you. And as long as the learning that they do have to do is valuable, they will stay with you. It's striking that balance with your own time, it's a challenge. It's hard. Yeah.
Let's go with Daryl and then Everett, and then Everett will lead on to the last question. Daryl.
Yeah, actually I do the timetable for the whole school as well. So I had the pleasure of sitting down and trying to come up with 3 or 4 different schedules, depending on the outcome. But after speaking to a lot of different colleagues in the IB community, we decided that they were going to have a maximum of 4 lessons per day. That would be 2 lessons in the morning, an hour and 15-minute lunch break, then 2 lessons in the afternoon. Also, we want the students to do a well-being activity every day if possible. And that could just be a short 20-minute checkout. We will provide ample of examples. In Sweden, yes, most families have an outdoor area to work out, but just something to keep them active. Also, with some of the policies we've been implementing, is what does it actually mean to be a 1-hour lesson? We do not want our staff sitting there doing a video, a lecture type, traditional, old school, just talking for an hour. We want it to be maybe 9 o'clock, a 2-3 minute video. Our attendance will be taken by our attendance system that we normally use. The teacher will maybe check in with the students 1 time throughout that lesson. It could be setting some work to do during the Wednesday lesson. They may not see them again till Monday. Also, we're having mentor times where the students will meet their mentors, just for a short 10-minute Zoom hangout, a welcome, just to keep the spirits up. Because, like I said, no one can plan the future. We've got to think also about that social and emotional learning. How can we have a balance to the students' learning? And like I mentioned earlier, we showed the schedule to the students in the different focus groups. Did they think it was manageable? We asked a few of the parents, just in friendly chat. And some, of course, said, yes, we want to make sure they have the math, they have English, they have this. But we said it's the MYP curriculum model. We will allocate maybe a little bit more to some of the other subjects groups. So we try to take away, if you normally have, say, 4 hours of math, you may only have 2 hours and 30 minutes of math. If you normally have 3 hours of something, you only have it for 1 hour and 30 minutes. And it's something that we will try and implement. If it works well, then be it. If not, we will need to adapt again. And again, listening to these discussions, other communications, you're always learning. No one knows exactly the best way for it. The only ones who can tell us are the students. Listen to the team, the PHE team, and also listen to the MYP team. The key is learning by doing.
Absolutely. I think, Everett, would you like to chime in there on that?
You know, much like Ken said, you know, we've been doing this for 8 weeks now. We are on spring break right now, and the consensus was just exhaustion. You know, we were all staring at blue screens far more than we need to. I have 2 children. One is in the middle school and one is in elementary, and they are, you know, they're one step short of being technologically addicted. And many of our students, that's actually a significant issue right now. For our structure, lesson time structure, we tried maintaining our original timetable when we started, and very quickly realized that did not work. So we shifted after the first week to a 3-day on, 2-day on lesson, where we did 3 days a week we had 1 hour lessons 3 days a week, and the next week we had 1 hour lessons 2 days a week. And much like Daryl was saying, and Ken was saying, those, you know, and others have said, those lessons were determined by the teacher. There was an expectation of face-to-face communication with the students, and then the workload is to be planned for not longer than an hour. We were finding that our students were spending multiple hours on assignments, which was a significant piece of our learning very quickly. So we have tried to reduce that down to just 1 hour per class, and you stop, you submit what you have, regardless of what that is. So hopefully that would manage the screen time. However, with our student population, many of them are also taking outside courses such as TESOL or advanced placement type courses, extension classes, which we have no control over. You know, and of course, tech addiction is an issue in any school with any middle school population, high school population. So we are trying to manage the screen time, but everybody right now is just ready to throw computers out the window, I think, and rightfully so. You know, our structure and expectations, the students are given assessment tasks. You know, as was said, it doesn't have to be, we don't have to see the students face-to-face 3 days a week, but they are given a task, and in that time frame, they should be able to complete that and then submit it at the end of the week. And then our attendance is taken based on their completion of the assessment tasks, or other expectations depending on the students and the students' needs. Yeah, we're all finding that managing our screen time is probably the hardest part of this. It is exhausting. It is exhausting being a teacher. It's exhausting being a parent, and you know, being a teacher to your children as well. And you know, watching teachers doing amazing work, but it's just plain hard. And nobody prepped for this. Nobody planned for this. And we're all learners as well in this, which is, you know, as we start to talk for looking ahead to the future, what we take from this, you know, adaptations to the remainder of the year. We'll finish at the end of June, and then start again likely in August or September. Looking at my units, looking at the instruction I've given, looking at the technology I've used, I think probably the most beneficial piece of this is forced us into utilizing technology we might not have used before, accessing resources that are available that we might not have thought about. I've been giving serious consideration to how do I how do I teach the content knowledge, especially that content knowledge portion, more efficiently through the use of technology. So when I see the students face to face, we bring them in and they have already, they have that established, at least have viewed videos or some established knowledge, then we can then have a much richer discussion. And then in the class, the inquiry is just going to be that much deeper because they have that information. They've been able to access it more quickly in a way that's made perhaps easier for them to, more efficient, using our time better, streamlining what is important for me as a teacher and what is important for my students to know. This has really been a process of stripping down curriculum and asking in a limited time frame, what is it that my students need to know? What is it that we need to teach? What is it that can meet the criterion and what's important? And for me, especially the ATLs and the social emotional awareness has really risen to the front much more than I thought it might when we started this. When you start thinking about this and you're assuming it's going to be a short period, then you find yourself 10 weeks later, you're still teaching online. You realize that the importance of that, and watching my own children and seeing their emotional needs and their social emotional needs really has pushed me to think, what can we do moving into the future, whether it's between now and the end of the year or in the next year, that really pushes the social emotional piece, so that my students are better rounded, are more well-rounded, because coming out of this, every one of us is going to be dealing with some level of trauma. Some of it's pretty low level, but some of our kids have been exceedingly isolated. They've not had contact with anyone outside of a computer screen or their parents. They've not been outdoors. These are all things I am considering. What do I do between whenever it is that we do come back, which we thought it would be potentially next week, but it looks like it's going to be pushed off, and then do the year. And then when we come back in August, September, where do I start? Do we start with a wellness piece? What does my curriculum look like? What really becomes important? And I think that's a discussion far beyond just my classroom, but really into the rest of our schools, and one that we all should have, not just as physical and health educators, but as schools, to consider the wellness of our kids.
Does anyone else would like to jump in before we go on to the last question? No? Cool. All right. So we're going to come to the last question. I think Daryl also said he wanted to add something at the end, or a note there. So Everett, would you like to start? What are your adaptations for the semester and next?
So, as I kind of answer some of that, curricular adaptations, I'm in a position where I will have minimal required curriculum. Criterion assessments are predominantly finished. So I have a criterion C, which I'm going to be looking at finishing. If we can get back into school, I'll quickly knock that out and frankly spend more time focusing on my students and less time on the curriculum. We're essentially restarting school. So I need to focus on that piece of it rather than the content. It gives us a really good time though to reflect as well on what was the wellness, how were these students during their time, get that. That would be potentially a really good reflection piece, but in the next 2 months, really reducing the assessment load and the educational load, and just rebuilding kids. That's the priority. Is we're here to teach kids. We're not here to force curriculum down their throat if we don't need to, and they've been in a very difficult situation. So allowing the students to come back in, reform groups, reconnect, rebuild relationships, and really heal in the next year or in the next couple of months, and then start again in August with a different focus. But keep it really simple.
All right, Remco, would you like to go? Can't hear you. Oh, sorry. There you go.
back on. Gotcha. I think the key is to, as everyone was saying, is like not to assume that you're going back next week or go back in the 2 or 3 weeks time. But when you deliver your work, assume it might take longer. What you deliver is not going to be a gap filler, but actually will be some meaningful work. And it might mean that if you're just in the process of starting up, is that you need that 1 week to establish a routine, but then assume it is something that could take a longer period of time, and that when you are going back into the classroom, it rolls out even into a decent unit as well. So basically prepare for the worst and assuming you're going off and are off school site for longer than you would like to be. For us now coming back after this holiday and going back into online again is like our biggest focus is as well is like how do we keep an element of wellness but physical wellness in there, that kids are staying physically active. Like we have an outstanding STLM program with a big focus on mindfulness. So mindfulness, the kids will still get in the morning from our homeroom teachers every day. So for us, another component is really like that physical engagement. How do we still get their heart rates up? So we are looking at a possible next unit of like an everyday activity with a reflection basically on it as from a wellness aspect. Like how do you stay physically engaged in these challenging times? What does that mean for your approaches to learning, right? How do you structure yourself, manage your day and your routine to keep that physical activity? And we don't know when we're going to be back. Rumors are that we are still out for a long time. I hope not, but it looks like we will be. So we're just planning ahead for another unit that we can make, which is valuable for the students, which, as Everett said, they take some learning away that they continue to use regardless of the situation we're basically in right now.
Great. Darryl?
Yeah, well, we've moved around the sort of the time frame of our units. We was originally going to do some of our fitness units now. We decided to postpone them. Well, they can actually be implemented at home. Also, looking at our assessment criteria, we changed that for our next unit, enabling that we could do more of an outdoor unit now. So we started this process, 5 weeks ago. So we can do our criterion C, get it done in time, but also it means that looking at the overview for the year, all our students in the MYP 1 to 5s have been assessed in all criteria already. So we do get that little bit of, I don't want to say luck, but where we know we don't need to rush through and try and implement a criterion D just for the sake of it. So we need to look at that. I would also say for forward thinking and as a learning experience, what can we use these digital platforms for to improve our overall teaching next year? If we look at our students in the inclusive education umbrella, is it putting more resources online to help them? Is it simplifying some of our instructions? Take this as an opportunity to learn and develop. I think that's it really, because no one knew what was coming. There's not a plan where it says this is the perfect lesson for online teaching. So just keep positive and keep learning.
Great. Ken, are you ready?
Yeah, this is a great example of managing kids. Now it's 2.
There we go.
And working. This really gives us a great opportunity to what I mentioned earlier, is have a really hard look at what the essential pieces of our teaching is. And one of the big adaptations I'm taking away from this is making sure that I'm not putting pieces in just for the sake of putting pieces in. That once I know what those essential pieces are, and those are rock solid, that gives so much more room to explore and provide students with the chance for some really deep inquiry around the essential curriculum, but providing a much more expansive experience for them. Making sure that you aren't just putting things in for the sake of them, and making sure that everything is in there intentionally and for a very clear purpose.
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys have said it all really. We are at the stage where I was always thinking that this is going to continue for us until June, until the summer holidays. And so we have planned out, or we planned out before, that we would, whatever units we are going to do during this time, we would have covered all of the MYP criterion that we hope to cover as much as possible. We realise that we may not have had to cover all both criterions twice, and so we expect that. And that now the MYP brought that out as an update, where both each criterion doesn't need to be assessed twice anyway, which is helpful. Because obviously if some had only assessed criterion C once, that may be a little bit more difficult, and obviously we don't want to overload them on criterion A assessment types because it's just a little bit too much. And so we sort of planned for that, and it sort of panned out that that was what's going to happen anyway. And so we are hoping then probably after maybe a 2 or 3 week period, we may finish the units that we're doing for this distance learning and move on to more activity-based units, which are possibly maybe even not assessed through MYP. But we're going to have to see. One of the grade 7 unit we've extended for 4 weeks after the spring break, so that we've got that time to think. But also it's time for teachers to think, and not just for the students to sort of get themselves together. Teachers are really needing to, in other departments as well as PHE, to really think about what they're doing, still keeping it as authentic as possible, but making sure that we're not overdoing it, we're not overwhelming ourselves, so that we can move on from this, because again, we have no clue when we're actually going to go back. I'm suspecting we'll miss all of the next quarter until summer. Would anyone like to add to that? I know, Daryl, you said you wanted to sort of add another question.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's important for all the people listening as well is constantly try and keep up on the IB website, the PRC. They're releasing documents as guidance. Again, the IB didn't know this was coming. We as educators didn't know it was coming. They're releasing updates every, I don't know, whatever it is, 3 to 4 days. Digital platforms are releasing updates. It's a learning experience. Be proactive. Take time to reflect on your teaching and learning. And in conclusion, I would say give yourselves a pat on the back as well for all of the hard work you're doing. Everyone out there is doing a great job under the circumstances. We all became teachers for the love of learning. We love seeing our students develop. Keep that positive, proactive mindset. It can get hard. I mean, every day I get some of my teachers come up. What's happening? Do we know? We don't know. But all we can do is try and prepare ourselves for the best, use these capabilities of the people around us to learn and just keep educating, because these students are going to make the difference, and they're the future. So just keep doing, keep trying, and keep positive.
I want to just add to that as well, because I know 2 of you are MYP coordinators, and my wife's a PYP coordinator, and I know how hard it's been for her, and I'm sure it's been extremely hard for you guys as well, managing all the teachers and teachers asking questions and struggling and so forth. You guys are probably doing extremely hard job right now, because you're not just managing the teachers, you're also managing all the students and any parent questions left, right and centre, and structures, and having to make decisions. And so I think us as teachers, within our departments, obviously we have our own teams, but we also need to sort of think about you guys, because you guys are working over and above. I can see Remco smiling there. I'm sure it's quite true. Would anyone like to add anything before we finish? This has been quite good, about an hour and a half.
I'll jump in here. I've noticed in the group, there's people that aren't necessarily MYP teachers, but they're also, or they are MYP teachers, and they're in places where they're just going into, like the state, my state, they just found out they're out till the end of the year. They're having significant shifts, and they're trying to figure it out. If you're just starting into this, or you're early into it, one, to just take a deep breath. It's tough. All of us are struggling. Whatever you're doing is enough. Use this as a great opportunity to access technology, try something you haven't done before. Take it slowly. Everyone is struggling with this, especially at the beginning. Everyone is trying to learn new platforms. Everyone's trying to figure out how to log into things. Everyone is trying to learn how to access things. As you start, take it easy and do what you can do and know that it's enough. Sometimes I've read in other social media forums that people are struggling with this because they're having high expectations put on them. This is really tough. Do the best you can. Pat yourself on the back, as Daryl said. You're going to get through this. In June, you're going to be able to look back and see some pretty cool things you've accomplished. But as has been said several times, reflect on this and look to what you can take to next year and how you can improve your teaching. You've been given a gift that a lot of us don't get in education, which is to really take some risks and try something new and learn. And it's going to be pretty cool next year to see the conversations and what happens.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Thank you very much, all of you. It's been a fantastic discussion and dialogue, and I'm sure and I hope a lot of educators out there will take this on. You can rewind this video on Facebook Live. It'll stay on there for some time. I'm also going to save this video and share it in that folder that I shared with you guys, and so you can pass it on to your colleagues and so forth. I know colleagues at school have been wanting to see this as well. So Everett and just Everett, you go to bed, I think. And Ken, you're just starting your day, so enjoy. Everyone take care of your family and stay safe. Okay.
Thank you, Dom.
Hey, Dom.
Thanks, Dom. Appreciate the conversation.
Be safe.